Hi, friends. Hopefully we are good to go. Welcome to another recap of a season 3 episode of American Gods. We're recapping episode 3, and then we're gonna give some thoughts on what might happen in episode 4, which is on the Stars app right now, but also airing at 8 p.m. tonight. And I like to watch it at 8 p.m. Eastern because then I can chat with people on Twitter at the Emily ESSE while I'm watching. So also some of the actors and other folks come on sometimes and chat with the group, so that's kind of fun too. Before we get started on our recap, I started last week with a couple of recommendations, and I thought that was fun, so let's do it again. As usual, I am continuing to read the 10th anniversary edition of American Gods. I have read this book before several times, but it's interesting to read as I'm watching season 3, so I'm kind of having fun revisiting it at the same time or right after seeing what's going on in the stories. And then, in case you all don't know who I am outside of American Gods recaps, I actually am a graphic novelist, and I co-wrote a book called The Underfoot, and it is actually a series. So this is book 1, which is available now, and book 2 is coming in April, so feel free to check that out. It's about intelligent hamsters with special skills who live in a post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C. All the humans are gone, and it's just animals struggling to survive and figuring out what is happening with some mysteries and some crazy stuff that's going on. It is appropriate for middle grade and up. So, some other recommendations I have for you this week. I am talking podcasts. I love some podcasts. I love to have some company while I'm getting ready for the day or whatever. I used to commute, and I loved it for that. So one of my favorites right now is called You're Dead to Me. It's by public historian Greg Jenner on the BBC radio. And it's basically little chunks of history discussed by Greg, the host, and a comedian and a historian who has an expertise in the area. So if you want to learn some history, check that out. And if you have kids, he also does one called Homeschool Histories, which is more for the children. So that's one of my favorite sets of podcasts right now. Another set of podcasts is one called We Got This with Mark and Hal. It's where these two guys basically debate really important issues like, should you put ketchup on a hot dog? Should chili have beans in it? Who's the worst Willy Wonka kid? And all of this other crazy stuff. There's a billion episodes. They're really funny. Sometimes there's history and you learn stuff, and it's just pretty entertaining to enjoy. And then there's one called The Thrilling Adventure Hour. It's a kind of old style radio show, which is also sci-fi stuff going on in the show. So it's like a style that's old style, but the sci-fi is very, things we might like if we're American Gods fans. And also the We Got This folks are in that group. And so that's kind of how I found out about Thrilling Adventure Hour, although it's been around for like 10 years. So there's plenty of back history to listen to and be aware of. Sometimes they also do live streams. So that's really fun because they do like a live recording and you can watch it and, do stuff like that. And then the last podcast I'm listening to right now is called What Trump Can Teach Us About Con Law. And it is something that I just discovered that was started in 2017, where a constitutional law professor discusses hypotheticals based on what Trump was doing at the time. It's interesting in retrospect as well as given what's going on today. But most importantly, a lot of people misunderstand constitutional law immensely. Most people in America do not seem to really understand the fundamentals of what the Constitution really means and how it actually functions, instead kind of taking catchphrases like, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater without understanding where they come from. So if you don't understand enough about con law or you want to learn more, try this one because it's not like a super biased in any direction. It's kind of just an examination of what the Constitution might allow and what the history and case law is. If you don't know, I'm a lawyer, so I'm really interested in this kind of stuff, and it's so far I've listened to about 4 or 5 of them, and they're pretty good. So that's all my recommendations. If you're looking for things to do or say, going forward, we're going to talk about American Gods. First off, though, I would like to note also that if you haven't seen it, some cast members for Sandman, Neil Gaiman's show that's based on his long-running comic book, a graphic novel, eventually, series, where it was collected, it has been announced. So if you want to go online, I'm not going to read the whole list, but there are some cast members for Sandman, which hopefully will go forward at some point. Who knows what's happening in Pandemic Land. And then I also want to say a heartfelt condolences to all the family and friends of Cloris Leachman, who was, of course, Zorea Veterinyaya on American Gods and sadly passed away. She had a long and storied career, and I did not know her personally, but she seemed like a wonderful person, and I'm very sad that she is gone from this world. So moving on, now that we've said that, to episode 3. Bruce Langley, who is Tech Boy and who tweets along with the show, which I really appreciate because he's a lot of fun. He said last time, our shows start out with 0 chill, and that is 100% true because the first thing we get in episode 3 is a bloody pig sacrifice close up, and I am really glad we had finished eating dinner before I started watching the show. But this is another one of those flashbacks that we get to how the gods came to America. We've seen them before when, the Vikings came to our shores, or native gods were being prayed to, or a bunch of different things, including, of course, when Wednesday or Odin came to the shores of America. And in this one, we see Demeter being prayed to, and there's a doll made of corn husks, it looks like, and through the pig sacrifice, it transforms into Demeter. And it was actually, I just really love the cinematography of that. It was beautiful. Like the way that the doll turns into Demeter was really great. It didn't make up for the pig blood, but it was really great. So I very much enjoyed that. Then we go to the present time where Cordelia and Mr. Wednesday are, Mr. Wednesday is getting ready to go see Demeter in the present. And he's kind of like, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you steam my suit? Is this ready? And like kind of nervously like getting everything ready to go and visit Demeter. And Cordelia is kind of like, yes, okay. And so it's a fun dynamic they've got going on. So you're seeing their relationship develop a little bit. And in the midst of this, I do take notes because, of course, who can keep it all straight otherwise? In the midst of this, I have notes that say blood, death, dead. I have zero idea what that referred to. I don't remember why I wrote that, but it's so reminiscent of just the whole of this show that this could be about a million things. This could be another reference to the pig sacrifice, or it could be a reference to like 1,000 other things that happened in the show at various times. So, that's my recap of the show. Blood, death, dead. Just kidding. So then we go back to Laura, who we haven't seen in a while. And I was wondering what we're gonna see from her. As I've noted before, she's not as prominent in the book in all of the ways that we're seeing her here. We do get, some of her backstory, but it follows Shadow a lot more and Laura a lot less in certain parts of the book. So in this, she's taking a literal elevator to hell, which is great. And it also, at first, I didn't know it was an elevator because you get just close-up flashes of what's going on and everything, and it's very, hectic. But the part I saw about everybody being jammed in there and holding on to the top, like straps or bars there, really gave me flashbacks to my daily commute back when we had daily commutes. And I have said recently I actually miss my daily commute now that we're all stuck inside forever. But that did not make me miss my commute. But she's stuck on this elevator to hell and or wherever it's going, but it doesn't look pleasant. And we see a little bit of that. Then we go over to small town Lakeside, and Allison is still missing. Allison McGovern, she is the young woman who was helped Shadow, got off the bus at the same time as Shadow, had a brief interaction with him where she or her friend thought he was cute, possibly her, I can't remember, and then helped him the next day find a winter coat in the store that she worked as a clerk at. And then she went missing. And last episode, Chad Mulligan, who is the small town sheriff, had interviewed Shadow about where he was when he left town, which of course he got back to town right after, she had gone missing. So there was some suspicion on him as a new person in town, and they wanted to know, what he'd been up to. So he was cleared at the end of that. And now, Chad is working on this search party, and Hinzelman is there. That's the older woman who runs the general store and who had greeted greeted Shadow as Mike Ainsel when he came to town. And as some other people have pointed out, had greeted him as Mike before he said his name was Mike. So that's a pretty interesting little bit there. So they're still looking for Allison, and Chad is giving his speech about here's how we need to do it. And Hinzelman is stepping in front of him and being like, okay, everyone, here's how we need to do it. And it's this great little comedic, ridiculous two-person comedic scene in the middle of something pretty serious. It also reminds me of, if you ever watched Psych, the first time Juliet was allowed to like lead a search on her own, and then Lassie kept stepping in front of her and repeating everything she said, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure that happens to a lot of people. But Chad manages to give everyone directions, and then, you know, there's this really interesting moment where he stops and says to Shadow, like, you know, hey, I'm sorry that I had to go through those questions with you last time when you got back. You know, I don't want you to think that it's because, you know, of your appearance or race, because we're not like Lakeside. He's really fumbling about this, but he's trying to say, and he says, like, you know, Lakeside's not really like that. And Shadow looks at him and he says, Lakeside's still in America, right? And it's beautiful because a lot of people say things like, oh, you know, we know America's got problems, but we're not like that. This part's not like that. That part's not like that. And it's a great commentary on the fact that, you know, all of America is still one whole. And so we can't just ignore the whatever other problems are going on, or we can't just say, we're not like that and excuse ourselves from the national discourse, or even say, we're not like that and actually be accurate. Because even if a particular person may not specifically be like that, or may not think they are, even if maybe subconsciously there is something going on in their head, you know, they can't vouch for the whole town. They can't say, oh, we're not like that, because inevitably somebody in the town probably is. So, I mean, I just thought it was a great call out of that. I thought it was handled well. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could say about that, but I should get through the rest of the recap. At this point, Wednesday, we go back to Wednesday and Cordelia, and they're checking out this retreat where Demeter is staying. And Wednesday's kind of puzzled about why she's there. He thinks maybe she runs it. He doesn't know what's going on. And they're just kind of spying it out to see how they should approach it, basically. Wednesday is a con man, as we've repeated time and time again. So I feel like even though it should be relatively easy for him to like just go in and ask for her, he's like sort of casing the joint, you know, like what's going on here? So that's what he's up to. In the midst of that, they're back in the forest, still searching. They find a mitten, like a blue mitten or whatever, and Chad's like really excited for a minute. He's like, oh, did she have any blue mittens? Do you remember? And then this young boy is like, oh, Grandma, I'm sorry. I think that fell out of my pocket. And I guess it's like, I think it's Hazelman's grandchild. And everyone's kind of like, oh, okay. So no hope yet. And then we go back to Laura. She is in this strange place that she's arrived at on this elevator down, and everyone has to go in the line according to their cards that they've been issued. And she has a blue card, and the people being called are orange cards, and she's like, I do not want to do this. So being Laura, she steals somebody else's card, which is classic. You know, this is Laura being Laura, even in wherever she is. And also, bears noticing, I love her retro look in these scenes. So it is a change from the flowery dress, I think it was, that she was wearing while she was in the land of the living there. So she steals the card and she goes into this long hallway, and the numbers on the doors keep changing, but she gets to the number that's on the card. She opens up the door, and it's just rows and rows of bug spray, which is a callback to her suicide attempt where she tried to kill herself in the covered hot tub with bug spray back in season 1 in flashbacks. I think it was season 1 flashbacks. So that's like, and they just fall out and, you know, are basically like sort of passively attacking her, I think, if I remember correctly. So that's Laura. She's stuck in wherever this is with a bunch of bug spray cans. In the meantime, we go back to Wednesday and Demeter again. The show likes to give you little snippets of what's going on all over, which of course a lot of shows do. So it just it makes my recapping really exciting because I just have to remember what was going on at what point. So here is Wednesday, and he goes in and he is trying to charm the person who is the front desk person or who are the administrator of this retreat, and talk to them about why he's there and what his connection is to Demeter. And I think this is the point where he actually does go and talk to Demeter for the first time, as played by Blythe Danner. And she is just like, she's great in this. I love her. And she's got kind of a gravity and a poise that don't allow for his charm to just get through, essentially, to a great extent. She's kind of just like, I know what you're doing. I see through you, and everything. So they don't have a really pleasant first meeting, and she is not thrilled to see him, and he tries to kind of put the charm on, and it's not working. Then we go back to Lakeside, and I don't know if they're doing it in shifts or if they've called off the search for the time being because it's too dark or what's going on. But Shadow and Marguerite are at Marguerite's place, and they're chatting, and there's a little bit of interesting, like, maybe chemistry going on there, but it's not anything super overt. But Shadow's trying to be like super helpful, and kind of, he brings her window locks for extra security, and then it turns out she already has window locks. She's already bought them and installed them herself, and but he's trying to help. And she says, oh, if you want to help, you can return these giant stack of newspaper clippings to the library for me, where she's the editor of the paper and had them out to do some research. And she gives them to him to return back. And so, if you try to help, you might get yours. So he takes these books to return to the library. And he also meets her youngest child, whose name is Leon. And the older child, as we will recall, he had disappeared or left home, and it's not super clear what's going on there. So let's see what happens next. Oh yeah, we go over to Bilquis, and as we had seen, Bilquis, what do we call it? Ingests her worshippers, so she had ingested this businessman, and instead of like it making her satisfied, she is sick and vomits, and looks very concerned and puzzled about the whole thing. So she's still kind of trying to figure out what happened, and she's looking at text messages from, I assume, the businessman's phone, and it's like his grandchild saying, hey, where are you, and stuff. And the grandchild is named Madeline, which I have no idea if that's a reference to Neil's daughter Maddie, but could be. Either way, she's kind of looking at it and having uneasiness about what's happening, and we don't know what's happening yet, but she's in trouble of some sort. So at that point, Shadow is looking at the newspaper clippings that he's been giving. Kind of, he's in his home again, and he's got the fireplace going, and he's just kind of flipping through this because maybe he's just bored. So he's looking through these newspaper clippings, and he sees a mention of, I believe, Marguerite's missing older son in one of the older clippings, and we get the idea that she was researching, seeing what coverage had been of what happened to him or something like that. But of course, she's lived in the town, so I'm not 100% sure why she would have to look through that, or maybe she put some of it in there. Unclear. Anyway, he's looking through this, and he falls asleep, and he has a dream in which he sees Bilquis as like Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman and Nina Simone and Angela Davis, and I think that's everyone. And he hears her voice saying, "Find me, Shadow Moon." And he tries to open this freezer that I think he thinks the voice is coming from, and he sees these dancers, and it's all very surreal. But he wakes up and thinks that, okay, something's wrong with Bilquis. So I don't know exactly when he does it, so I'm just going to skip ahead to whenever he does it. He calls up Wednesday at some point and says, hey, how do I get in touch? Because, something's wrong with Bilquis. And Wednesday says something about his dreams and then gives him the information as to where Bilquis lives. So in the meantime, but I think that happens like a couple of scenes later, but it's just like a little bit part, and I don't remember where it happens because who knows. So at this point, Laura is sleeping in a theater and is told by like the ushers or whatever that she's in purgatory. So that makes sense. We thought it might be hell or purgatory or something like that. And they're told that they're telling her the kind of staff attendants to this little old-fashioned theater. They're wearing their old-fashioned theater gear, and they have a projector, and they're like very in the tone of the time in which the theater looks like it's from and everything. And they say, you have to acknowledge reality. Here's the life of Laura Moon. And they want her to watch her life, which, I mean, it could be an interesting experience, but Laura's not having it. She's like, I don't want to see this, and drops about 1 million F-bombs and is Laura, basically. And after a couple of minutes of some scene at a hotel, she goes into the screen, which is a fun little effect that I don't know how Laura knew she could walk into the screen in Purgatory, but she did, and it was fun. And she says, basically, look, here's what happened. You know, I helped my dad cheat on my mom, and then my dad cheated on my mom a lot, and then my mom cheated on my dad a lot, and then they both had alcohol problems and all of that. And then I grew up, and I was messed up, so I had a lot of sex that was like unwise, just random partners or whatever. And then I met Shadow, and I messed that up, and I died. There's my life. Like, here is my life. I have acknowledged it. And they like listen to her, and then they're like, sit down and then watch the whole thing. And she tries to get out of it, and stuff happens to her, like falling into water that is reminiscent again of like that hot tub attempt at suicide and all of this kind of thing. And eventually she is like, all right, fine, and I'll watch it. Fine. In the meantime, Wednesday is, you know, back with Demeter in her room at this retreat, and he's got flowers and he's got chocolates and he's bought her a dress, and he's like, oh, look at all this stuff I got for you. And it's like classic romantic love bombing. And she's like, I know you just want money and support for your war. So I really enjoyed Demeter's character so far. So, you know, he's not doing too well because she has money and he wants it and she knows it, and she's not really taking this whole courtship wooing thing very seriously because of that. And then we go back to Laura, and we discover, and this is a really cool part of the you know, thing that's been going on with the purgatory aspect we've seen here. She watches the video again and sees that her real childhood is that she didn't have anything to do with her parents, you know, cheating on each other and their alcoholism and all of that stuff. And she remembered it that way, and her whole life kind of blamed herself for what had happened, and in fact was not responsible for what the actions of her parents. And, you know, she's like, well, I wish someone had told me this when I was alive. But you know, she had made it in her head that it was about her. And I like how they approach that, in part because a lot of children who are in difficult situations where their parents are not being good parents, you know, where they are, or they're not being good partners, and that's coming out in the you know, familial relationship, they blame themselves and they think it's their fault, and it causes lots of emotional and, you know, psychological detrimental effects on children. And this is a huge widespread issue everywhere for a long time, possibly forever. And it's good to have it acknowledged and to have a commentary here that perhaps, you know, you're not remembering it the way that you think it happened. It happened a different way. It wasn't your fault. I mean, surely, you know, children do things that are their faults, but usually it's not their parents cheating. That doesn't have anything to do with the children. That's the parents, you know, and their choices. So that's pretty interesting. And she goes back to the waiting room with her little pamphlet that says acknowledge reality. And it looks like maybe she's getting ready to acknowledge reality. She's kind of waiting around there. And at this point, Shadow has, as we said, called Mr. Wednesday, and they have, he has been told where the apartment that Bilquis is in, where that is. And he's gone over there, and he, first of all, let me say, again, this apartment that she lives in, or this building in this apartment, is gorgeous. There's like peacocks on the wall, which is kind of a theme with Bilquis, where we're seeing these peacocks, and there's stained glass windows, and inside, you know, usually it's like very lushly appointed and just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I'm super jealous, but I would not want to live in the part of it that we see here, which is that it's like all thrown apart and torn apart, and there's blood on the floor, and there are peacock feathers in the blood, and Shadow's like, what the hell is going on here? There's like a, you know, the love seat has been upended, and there's all stuff all over the place. And the last thing we see before the end of the episode is Tech Boy, like kind of on the floor looking traumatized. He's got blood on his hands. He's glitching. He's got like kind of static sounds coming out of him, and he looks absolutely terrible. And that is how we end the show. No, zero chill, as Bruce Langley said. He's totally accurate. There's nothing chill about all that. So that is how we end. And now we're going to look at what we might see tonight. And if anyone is watching and has any thoughts or questions, feel free to, chime in or come later on Twitter and at the Emily ESSE and chat with me about what's been going on, or these recaps or anything that you have thoughts on. But in terms of episode 4, which is called The Unseen, pardon me, I do occasionally have to look at my notes to remember what's going on. Tech Boy and Bilquis and Shadow, we're going to see something with them, obviously, or I hope so. I certainly hope so. And Shadow, I assume, is going to try and figure out from Tech Boy or with Tech Boy what the heck happened. They're probably, Shadow's going to go looking for Bilquis. I am not sure. I think I saw a trailer that looked like they were kind of working together to see what's going on. So is this a larger part of the Ms. World, Mr. World plot? Is this something else that has happened? What is her sickness related to? Maybe we'll find out some of that stuff, and maybe we don't know. But I think that we're going to see a bunch of stuff to do with that. I think Laura, the last time we saw her, was waiting in line after acknowledging her reality, and so perhaps we're going to see what happens next with Laura. I would like to see. I would really like Mad Sweeney to come back, but I don't know if that'll happen. And I don't know if we're going to see any more Wednesday and Demeter. I mean, she was turning him down pretty much when, we saw that happening. But it could be that, in fact, there's something else that's going to happen and we'll see more. I don't know their history, from what we've seen so far. We haven't seen their history. So it could be that we'll see some more of what is going on with how they have interacted in the past and why Demeter had this immediate reaction to him, like, oh, I know what you want, I know who you are, I know how you are. But it could just be because they, were however acquainted in the past, whether they really were exes. It seems like that's the case, but not. I don't know if they were actually married, because Cordelia forged a marriage license in order to allow Wednesday to interact with Demeter more in this retreat. So I forgot to mention that. So I don't know if we'll see more of their relationship or what else is going on. And let's see. I know that Wednesday had put a pin in this whole there was that scene where we saw him crowd surfing with the musicians, the death metal musicians, and then the lead singer of that was, if I remember correctly, who was played by Marilyn Manson, was murdered or killed or died or whatever the case, and Wednesday was like, oh, we'll deal with that later. So I don't know if perhaps we'll see what was happening there, or he will be continuing to gather money and backing and support for his war. So I'm sure we'll see some kind of Wednesday back and forth there. And will we see a lot of Wednesday and Shadow interaction? Maybe not, if Shadow's still on the Bilquis hunt at this point. So that's what I'm thinking. If you guys have any thoughts, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I will see you next time and on Twitter at the Emily ESSE.